There are pivotal moments in each one of our lives. These are moments that form the foundation of our lives. They are the moments that define us. I want to tell you about one of those pivotal moments in my life. The story begins when I'm 2 years old. I live in Utah with my mom and my sister and my father. My father develops late onset schizophrenia, and he starts to hear voices. They were the voices of ancient prophets, and they were telling him that he was going to be the next prophet, that he would heal the world of its suffering. But that before he could do this, he had to do something to prove his faith. He had to make a sacrifice, and that sacrifice was to be me. Fortunately for me, my mom didn't think this was a very good idea. So she got me and my sister, and we left the house and we got out. And for the next 8 or 9 years, we were on the run, always moving from small town to small town every year or two, inconspicuous locations. And I'll tell you this, we were very poor. In fact, we had next to nothing. But at the same time, we had everything because we had each other. And I don't say that to be trite. I say that because I want you to know that, to me, my mom was everything. She was my strength. She was my foundation. She was my hero. I loved my mom. She was a black belt in karate. She was tough as nails, and at the same time, she was loving and gentle. She had the voice of an angel. She could play multiple musical instruments. In fact, I remember clearly spending countless hours as a child laying on the floor and looking up at her and watching as her fingers would fly across her flute or strum her guitar, and listening to the sound of her voice as she would sing to me. I knew that no matter what life threw at us, and it threw a lot at us, that as long as we were together, we would be fine. She married twice more, and neither marriage lasted. Both gentlemen were alcoholics and abusive. In fact, I remember with one of the small houses we lived in, my bedroom was the hall. And there was a door on either side, and I would set up traps. I would tie a string to one doorknob and reach it over to the next doorknob. And then I would place hangers across that string so that when either door would open, the string would sag, the hangers would clap together, and I would wake up so that I could get out of the way. Well, life was sometimes very difficult. And I started school. I went to school, and I was always the new kid. We were always, my clothes never fit. I always smelled bad. I never fit in. I never belonged. I remember at one of my schools that I went to, there was a cement pipe next to the playground. To avoid getting beat up, I would spend every recess hiding in that cement pipe because it was dark and safe. And I would look out of that pipe and watch the children play. And I would wonder what it would be like to be out there, to be one of them, to belong. When school was over, I would wait until the coast was clear and everybody had gone home, and then I would make that long journey home. But as soon as I walked in the door, my mom was there. I would feel her warm embrace. I always felt like I belonged. Even when we could no longer afford to keep our sister, I stayed with my mom. We were always together. And I knew that no matter what happened in life, if I was with her, I would be fine. Well, when I was 11 years old, we lived in a small camper trailer in the deep forest of Marion, Montana. And we had literally nothing. I remember going to the lake with my mom, and we would pull up our pants and we would splash around and find crawdads, put them in a bucket and bring them home and boil them for dinner. One Christmas, I had got a a bow and an arrow from my grandma. And at 11 years old, I could shoot a squirrel out of a tree. Katniss Everdeen? Pfft, whatever. Well, my mom knew that we couldn't live like this. And so she started to sing. She was an entertainer. She had tremendous talent. And so she would travel. I was 11. She would be gone for a couple days, night or two. Those were long and dark, lonely nights in that cold, small trailer with those thin walls in the forest. But she would always come home when she said she would, until one night when she didn't. And I remember very clearly sitting on my bed with my face pressed up against the glass, huddled in a blanket, peering out the window and searching the darkness for some sign of light, for the merest hint that her headlights were approaching that would indicate her return. And I waited, and I waited, and they never came. Well, eventually my sadness turned to fatigue, and my fatigue turned to sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I made sure to play in the woods close to the trailer so that I could be there when she came home, because I knew she would. Well, what I didn't know was that she had been in a terrible car accident. She had broken her neck, and she had no way to get a hold of me. I lived in a camper trailer. We had no power. We had no heat, no running water. We certainly didn't have a telephone. So there she was, stuck in the hospital waiting, knowing that I was there, but unable to communicate. Finally, she was able to get out of the hospital, and she showed up. And when she came in one night, something was different. Something had changed. What I didn't know then, but what I know now, is that life had dealt her a final fatal blow. She said, "Pack your stuff, we're leaving." I thought, fine, we've done this a number of times before. So we threw all of our stuff in a bag, and 3 Glad garbage bags, tossed them into the car, and drove through the night to my grandma's house. We arose late, and my mom brought me into the living room, and she said, "I want to talk to you." And I remember it clearly because it was a beautiful day, and the sun was shining, and the rays of light were streaming through the window. You know that morning, you know those times, and you can see the dust motes floating on the air. And I sat down on the couch, and she sat across from me and stared into the carpet and said, "I'm leaving." And my whole world stopped turning. And I didn't process anything beyond those words. And I knew that she offered some sort of an explanation, and I didn't hear it. Before I knew it, she stood up, and she walked out the door. And I sat in the living room and watched as my whole world drove away. And it broke me. And I spent months with every night sobbing into my pillow, begging God to bring back my mom. Please, please, please bring back my mom. But he didn't. Instead, he did something else. He gave me something greater, something unexpected. He gave me strength. He gave me perspective. And what I realized at that moment was that I had a choice, that I could choose to either allow myself to be consumed by sadness and depression and anger and doubt, or I could rise above it. I could put it behind me, and I could face my future. And I realized that my life did not have to be the product of my past. And I saw the potential of my future instead. That was my pivotal moment. And I realized then and there that that was my choice, that it is our choice. The choice is ours. In physics, there's a term called escape velocity. Escape velocity describes what it takes for an object, like a rocket, to leave the gravitational pull of the Earth and reach orbit. See, I believe in life that we are all held back, captive by the gravitational pull of our past, of labels, of self-doubt, of our environment, of habits, of friends, sometimes family. That we are held back by these gravitational pulls that threaten our very future. And the most fundamental step of escape velocity is a fundamental change to how we perceive ourselves, not as the inevitable product of our past, but rather for the potential of our future. And if you think about that rocket, if I were to show you a rocket and ask you what that was, you would not tell me about its component parts that come from various factories across the world. You would say that is a rocket and it carries people into space. You would not see it for what it was or where it came from. You would see it for what it is and what it can do. You would see its potential. But somehow when we look at our own lives, we tend to become so blinded by the emotion of the gravitational pulls that hold us back that we fail to see the promise of our future. But what my life has taught me is that it is not our past that matters. It is our future. That we have the power as human beings because of our prefrontal cortex, which gives us this capacity to perceive things not as they are, but as they can be. As human beings, we have the power to perceive ourselves not as the inevitable product of our past, but for the potential of our future. That was my pivotal moment. This is your moment. This is your life. And now it's up to you to reach your personal escape velocity and make your own life great. Thank you.